Republicans embarking on a 40-city speaking tour for his new book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Here's a clip from his Channel 4 interview that went viral earlier this year.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Please welcome Jordan Peterson, professor. Hey, great pleasure to meet you.
How you doing?
I'm a big fan, as you might have guessed, and I love what you just said, that in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. And that went viral. That made you very famous. Why do you think that sparked such a reaction?
Well, because I think that what I was saying was self-evidently true, but not expressed very well very often. I mean, look, most of the time when you're discussing something that needs to be discussed, everybody's actually rather upset about it. You know, if you're actually talking about something important, right? Because why talk otherwise, unless you're just shooting the breeze? But if there's an issue at hand that has to be discussed, then people are already upset and they have different viewpoints. And the offensiveness in some sense is built into that. And you know that because if you have a family, if you have a wife, if you have an intimate relationship, and you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other if you're actually having the conversation is zero. And so you don't have to think unless you have a problem. And if you have a problem, then when you think, you're going to offend people. And so what, are we not going to think? That seems like a bad idea.
No, yeah. You're obviously not an American. We love to not think. But you know, I used to do a show called Politically Incorrect back in the 90s, and, oh, thank you. Oh, the 90s, we remember them. And so I was always asked, what is your definition of political correctness? And I had to come up with one. I said, it's the elevation of sensitivity over truth, which seems like what it still is, except it's worse than ever.
It's more like the elevation of moral posturing about sensitivity over truth. It's even worse.
Yeah. So where did it come from? How did we get to this place where we're so fragile? The safe space people.
Oh, I think that you can pretty much blame it on the universities. I think that they've pursued, especially in the humanities and in the social sciences as well, they've pursued a policy of a radical leftist policy with an overlay of postmodernism, which kind of a literary criticism approach that's produced all of this. As far as I can tell, I think you can lay a lot of it at the feet of faculties like the faculties of education. There was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education this week that just devastated the faculties of education, taking them to task for low academic standards and for possession by ideology and for basically indoctrinating people in a cult-like manner and playing identity politics and group identity. And
no free speech. They don't seem to. There was an incident in Fresno State. I don't know if you saw this, but Barbara Bush died. Okay, some professor there tweeted something nasty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have tweeted it. She called Barbara Bush a racist and said she raised war criminals. Okay, you know, it's.
Yeah, well, the timing.
This crowd likes it, but I mean, it's nasty, and they're considering suspending her. And here's what the president of the university said. He said this was beyond free speech. This was disrespectful. Have we lost the thread back to knowing what free speech is? Yes, it can be disrespectful. That is covered under free speech. President of Fresno, you idiot. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, and you see this too. I think where it's manifesting itself in a particularly appalling manner is in the increasing unwillingness of comedians, for example, to go on university campuses to be funny. And when comedians start...
I'm one of them.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, fuck them. I'm not gonna... I call these people emotional hemophiliacs. You know, it's like the least little thing will make them start to bleed. But it makes me... because their answer is not to go into a room full of sharp objects. The answer is to make all of us wear bubble wrap.
Yeah, right.
So nothing we ever do makes them have a moment of discomfort.
Well,
it's
there's
really
also,
very narcissistic.
Well, there's also this idea that's promoted by the people who are protecting those who are easily offended, that the way to make people secure is to protect them from things that they don't want to encounter. And there isn't a clinician, like I'm a trained clinical psychologist, and there isn't a clinician in the country who's worth his or her salt that would ever make that claim. Because you don't make people, first of all, it's hard to make people safe because life is seriously not safe.
Yes.
And the way that you make people resilient is by exposing them to things that they're afraid of and that make them uncomfortable voluntarily, but you use exposure.
Right.
And and so, like, if you over-coddle people, if you protect them from everything that's sharp, you make them dull and stupid and narcissistic, and it's a really bad idea.
So you do know America.
Good.
One thing I mean, your book is fantastic, and one of the rules that I really love is you say, don't let your kids do anything that would make you not like them. That's what I've been thinking for years when I call them the fuck you mom generation. When I see kids, never in life because I never go near a child, but like on TV and movies, I see kids like saying fuck you mom. And I'm like, if somebody who wasn't your child did that, you'd be immensely offended, whereas the parents just take it. What's up with that?
Well, people don't like to admit that they can dislike their children or children in general, and right.
No, I know what you mean. And
but they can.
No, they totally can.
One of the things you see very commonly as a clinical psychologist is family members who hate each other and who it's like they have their hands around each other's necks for 20 years and are squeezing very slowly, trying to strangle each other. And you see parents who clearly detest their children and have ever since they were born. And part of that, I know it's a terrible way of looking at things, but it's true.
It's so true.
And one of the things...
No, parents confide that in me because I don't have kids.
Yeah, well,
no.
That makes it safe.
They do.
But
no, but they say things like, yeah, I love my kids, but if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, okay.
Like, well, don't tell the kid that.
Well, but that's so bad. Look,
it is so
it's
bad.
So bad because the thing is about little kids is that little kids have a wonderful element to them, and most people spontaneously like little kids. They'll give them a chance, and if you have little kids, one of the things that's so wonderful about it is that when you bring them out into the world, even people who aren't in good shape, rough people, and who maybe don't have much patience for humanity. It brings out the best in them, you know? And so people are willing to give your kids a chance. But then if they misbehave, especially if they're rude and they don't have any respect and they're whiny and they don't know how to listen, then people don't like your kids and you don't. And then your kids go out into a world where no one likes them. And that's what you do to your kids if you don't like them, is you send them out into that world.
But how did parents get so pussy whipped? By their own children. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, it's like they act the way a guy acts when he's super sprung on some chick and just lets her walk all over him, and whatever she does, he puts up with. I don't get how we got to that place.
I think parents are afraid of exercising authority because they tend to think that authority will crush the creative spirit of their child.
Oh, fuck.
Well, that is...
Okay. No, I see, everything this man says, I think is common sense.
You guys should have a baby together.
Yeah, we should have a baby together. It's like we get crucified for what we say. I don't think anything we say is controversial at all.
It's hard.
Do you think he's controversial?
It's hard. I just had a kid. It's hard figuring it out. And by the way, everyone is neurotic. That's why we have a hard time raising children the right way, because we live in the most neurotic, insane, over-connected, crazy world.
Yes.
Donald Trump is our president.
Right,
How
I know.
are we expected to raise normal children?
I know.
It's a crazy time, Bill.
Okay,
And you haven't talked about social media. Social media is a huge part of this. I mean, it abets the narcissism. It has everyone preening for everybody else. It has people going into their little tribal places and sorting themselves that way. That's a huge problem here, too, I think.
Well, there's other... There's other factors that are contributing to overprotection, I think, that can't be laid directly at parents' feet. I mean, we have fewer children, so they're more special. they're not raised so much by their siblings, right? So, and people have them when they're older, and so they're much more careful with their kids in some sense. And that's a bad thing in some ways, because you want your children to be free enough to go out in the world and learn some resiliency. You don't want to be hovering over them all the time. And if you're a young parent and you have many kids, then you kind of get outnumbered by your kids, and they're going to go and do their thing. And so some of it's demographic and some of it's attitudinal. And you know, maybe that's a consequence of the pill and the fact that we've restricted.
Let's get rid of that.
But,
no, I didn't say we should get rid of it, but it's really thrown like the fact that we have effective birth control means that families are much smaller. It means that children are much more precious, and that means that they tend to be overprotected. It has nothing to do with abolishing the pill. It's a way of analyzing the complex consequences.
Well, as a father of 3 sons and 3 grandsons, I just want to say...
And where are they, in Washington?
Kids, they're in Washington State.
Is that a good place to live?
Yeah, one was conceived in Hawaii, but that's okay. That's another story. So, the kids are not the problem here. The kids get climate change. The kids get gay marriage. The kids get legalization of marijuana. The kids get saying we should step on Donald Trump every chance we get. The kids are not. The kids are just fine. They're the smartest generation.
But you know what the kids also get? That you can call social services if your parent does anything you don't like.
Kids don't have
That's
to.
one reason parents are not rough with their kids. I don't mean physically rough. I mean in any way rough, because kids do know that they can do that.
The only problem with kids is they don't vote. That's the only problem with kids. And if you got a kid out there, tell them to vote next November. We got to get them to vote.
I don't know if the price that we have to pay for children having some insurance against abuse is kids who are overly politically correct. I'll take the trade-off. Yeah.
I don't really think that's
kind of a lousy applause for that, Alex. I don't know if that was all that popular.
I'm not saying it for the applause,
Okay.
Bill.
I don't think it protects children from abuse at all, that sort of thing, because social services and the government provision of protection for children is not a very effective way of preventing children, or preventing abuse of children. What's effective, and this is something you'll want to know as a parent, is that you have every right to intervene in your child's life when they're misbehaving in a way that actually impinges on you in a serious manner, because you're going to want to like your kid. And that means you have to come to a real negotiation with them about what their space is and what your space is. And you have to be able to take the right to yourself to put those limitations on them. And you're going to find that that's a very difficult right to take, because you're going to be doubtful about your authority. And that'll allow your child to run roughshod over you, and you won't like them as a consequence.
You know me so well for someone who's never actually met me. But thank you.
See, everywhere you go, you cause trouble, Professor.
Yeah, well.